Welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. I am joined by the one and only Jackie Lindal. Did I get your name right?
Yes, you did.
Good. Awesome. So, how has your day been going so far? Run me through what you've been up to leading up to our podcast interview today.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was woken up rudely early by my 2-year-old, which is normal. So she woke me up early, had some coffee, and then had to go feed my animals and take care of them. And then really, I started cleaning the house like a mad woman because my mother-in-law is here to help watch the gremlins and keep them quiet while we're doing this. So that's pretty much been my morning was cleaning my entire house.
I like it. I like it. That's very real.
It
So
is.
for people who haven't met you yet, give us a little bit of an intro on like who you are, how you got there kind of thing.
Yeah, so I am a personal trainer. I work solely online now, helping women who are busy and overwhelmed with life, like I am, just do their best to lose weight, get fit, get strong, feel confident, and without bullshit restrictive diets or hours of cardio or excessive workouts. So that's kind of what I do for work. And I'm a mom of two. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And we live out on an acreage. We have two horses. That's kind of my main hobby right now that I've gotten back into horseback riding over the past few years. Yeah, so I've been a personal trainer for 8 years now. I used to be a veterinary technician in my former life, and then I left that field to take on personal training full time. And so I left that career in 2018 to do personal training. And then in 2022, I went solely online after I had my second baby. Yeah.
I dig it. I dig it. Um, some of the things that I like to dive into on my podcast are kind of like the things that people don't consider when they're kind of going through their seasons of life.
Hmm.
And to provide more context, like yesterday, well, people will see it in my Instagram story. I was at Evolve Strength South looking out the window, and out the window is the old competitor to the place where I used to work. And
Really? That's funny.
it's wild to think about because time goes by so fast. Like for me, it feels like it's been like a year since being in my old career, and it's quite the opposite. Like it's been
Hmm.
probably at least 7 to 8 years. And then the
Yeah.
other thing is just the irony of how I can just simply look over the fence and see my old life, like the same forklifts, the
Yeah.
same stainless steel material. But with that said, despite the fact that I'm like, oh man, I'm in such a better place now, I can always pick out the lessons, like the things that kind of made me me, like the things that probably
Hmm.
helped me get to the point where I am at in the fitness industry. And like there was times where like my work ethic would not have been the same as it is now if not for being in that industry. Because there was times where it was
Hmm.
like there would be very difficult tasks for us to do and we just had to find a way. Like it might have been
Yeah.
impossible to other places, but for us, it was just like we're kind of like a startup company and we have to get resourceful. And I tended to leverage my manpower the most. So if like there's a forklift busy, I'd be hand bombing like a piece of pipe out the door onto a semi truck. Um, obviously
Just got to
that
do what you got to do.
I was all about that mentality, and obviously that doesn't
Yeah.
really fly with a lot of like safety standards and whatnot, but I was fine. I opted in. It's my own free will.
Yeah.
Um, but it I was reflecting, I was like, why do I always bounce back? And I think that job
Hmm.
helped me bounce back over and over and over. So with that said, you can choose any career that you've done outside of fitness, but I want to reflect on some of the lessons that you've learned or like tough moments. Like I've had character building moments, so I'm curious, maybe you've had some that have kind of like enlightened you as to how you've gotten to this point within your fitness career.
Yeah. So, I mean, being a veterinary technician and going through that field of work, that really taught me a lot about client and customer care. It taught me a lot about, I mean, let's for for me, it really got me into like the science of things, because being a vet tech, we learn a lot about the science of the body, how things work. And I mean, universally, a lot of things kind of are the same or similar between different species, including humans. So that really I found kind of got me interested in science-based things, and very much coming at coaching client care as well as animal care from a science-based background. So that really, being a vet tech, it also helped me understand different processes of the body, because we had to learn about all those kinds of things, and really how more so ins and outs of how the body work. Now, obviously, there's different things based on the different species of animals, but it gave me a really general knowledge background that transferred really well when I was studying to be a personal trainer. Not only that, for me, it was being a vet tech, it's a hard job. The work ethic, being on your feet all day, dealing with customers all day, learning how to turn on your customer service voice and then turn it off when you're done with it. Being able to kind of bring your best foot forward when you're interacting with somebody, and how to explain things to different people so that they understand. I found that really helpful for me transferring into being a personal trainer and having to explain things to clients, show them how to do things properly in the gym and whatnot, so that I could explain for different people who maybe learn in different ways. So those types of things really transferred from that career to this career. So I was already well versed in, well, not 100%, not as well versed as I am now, but I already had a really good understanding of how to talk to people, how to interact with people, picking up a conversation with just about anybody. I would say is kind of like a secret talent that I can have when I want to. And then, yeah, just really bringing that like client based experience forward for them.
I love that. And you kind of got me thinking of some other things as you're talking about like the science-based aspect of coming from that industry and using that lens in the fitness industry. Yesterday, I watched this one reel like 20 times. I'm gonna check out which one it was because it got me thinking. It was, you know how you play the reel and it just repeats over and over
Yeah.
and over.
Yeah.
So just I'm literally going to go to my Instagram account and make sure that I'm saying the right account. Um, I believe it was Dr. Joe Zundel. One second. I will find him. Yeah, so he did a post about food dyes and giving you cancer.
Hmm.
And I've been seeing that in everybody's content.
Oh my
Now,
gosh, yes.
I tend to kind of like let the cards play as they do as it
Yeah.
comes to these trending topics and stuff. Like
Yeah.
I consume the information, but I'm like, I can go over this nuance one-on-one with my clients.
Yeah.
And if somebody asks me, I'll have a position on it, but I
Hmm.
don't need to dive into the murky waters.
Hmm.
But what stood out to me was the way he kind of positioned our ability to exercise discernment in consuming information,
Hmm.
which is incredibly underrated in all facets because I find that the way that we perceive things can be really influenced by social media. Just like you could see, well, one example being you can see somebody doing an exercise with a very light load,
Yeah.
but then they have a very jacked physique. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, people will make this correlation that that person built that physique off of like 40-pound goblet squats on a ramp.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's just simply not the case. But because of the social media, just like the way that we take in the information very quickly, we're like, okay, I see a 250 pound, 6'4" dude doing goblet squats on a ramp. That must be how he built his quads.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in all reality, it's probably the very boring stuff that they did
Hmm.
for like 15 years before they made that post that was geared towards
Yes.
people with less equipment.
Yes.
So I am curious, what has been a time for you within the fitness industry that you have had to really exercise discernment, whether it has been providing clarity to a client or kind of like figuring out what your stance was on some aspect of the information that we have that we pass on to our people?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been an ever evolving journey just for myself. So, when I very first got into the fitness industry, sometimes you come in with some biases and dogmatic ways of thinking without even really realizing it until that has been challenged or approached in a different way. So I feel like a lot of, especially a lot of women who are in the fitness industry go through this where you go through, you kind of swing really far on the pendulum of almost being a bit too extreme. And for me, it was, I felt like I could only eat certain ways. I had to eat super clean, really, like this was really from my experience, and be really, really strict and dogmatic about my nutrition and my exercise and that kind of thing, where it left very little room for balance. But then it's diving further into things and being more open to different content, seeing different coaches and how they approach it with a real moderate approach. Actually, like Jordan Syatt was one of the people that really helped change my view on moderation and how to be strict. I didn't really believe that moderation was a thing for the longest time. I thought that it was either you're this or you're over here, and there's no in between. And then I kind of started to realize that, oh, like what I'm doing is actually borderline unhealthy. It was unhealthy, let's just be honest. And that I needed to force myself to swing back more towards the middle of better balance with nutrition, better balance with my exercise and workouts and things like that. That was just from my personal experience. Other things that I have found over the years is, we all know that, for example, a calorie deficit is what is needed to lose weight, right? That's just like the laws of thermodynamics apply to everybody, no matter what they think. But there are certain things that can make achieving that more difficult. And there the big talk in at least women's health and fitness right now is hormones and all of these things. And at the end of the day, regardless of your hormones, regardless of your age, whether you're postmenopausal, perimenopausal, or a woman in your 20s, at the end of the day, you need to be in a calorie deficit to lose body fat. But there are certain things that can make being in a calorie deficit so much harder for certain populations of people. It doesn't change that it's needed, but certain things can really affect it. And the more that I've been coaching, especially women who are postmenopausal, have endometriosis, have PCOS, these hormonal issues that make it more difficult, the more I have to realize the nuances of those things and how to better explain and serve those clients who need that extra little bit of help.
I mean, that got me thinking about conferences and people that I've met who have had similar kind of like ways of articulating the nuances of moderation and the nuances of like energy balance, etc. So I'm going to take a moment to give a shout out to Aram's event, the Real Coaches Summit in Vegas.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's got a very similar vibe to the vibe we would have experienced at the Evolve Strength Summit, where we
Yes.
got to connect and have a little conversation. And
Actually
what I
in
would,
person.
yeah, I mean, it was game changer because like we really geographically we are not that
Yeah.
far apart, but
No,
it took
not at
many
all.
years. But nonetheless,
Yes.
so what I want to say is I've been basically no matter who is on the other side of the microphone these past few episodes, I've been kind of giving people nudges to attend that event. So if ever you had the
Yeah.
ability to kind of like make that happen, I would highly recommend. But as a sidebar, I'm curious, do you have any fitness conferences on your radar in the near future?
Nothing booked. I mean, we did just do the Evolve conference with the Evolve conference, sorry, which was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. And it really sparked that, like, I need to attend more of these events. So for me, I have certain ones that I do want to attend. They're not booked yet, but they're on my radar of which I want to attend. The Real Coaches Summit being one of them. Um, there's another one, of course, the name is escaping me right now. And I think it was one that you and I even talked about during the Evolve conference. And I'm so bad with names, so I can't remember it now. But I think it's one that Dr. Lane Norton puts on. He put it on earlier this year. And so definitely that one. And yeah, so definitely going to more conferences and networking with other people in the industry and stuff is really important to me. And it's higher on my radar now after attending the Evolve conference. And I'm definitely jazzed up to want to be booking more and going to more events for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like the reason why I kind of went on this side tangent is like sort of like the things you are passionate about as a coach and your way of positioning them is very aligned with a lot of the people that are going to show up at that conference. Even if you
Hmm.
went there and went to zero presentations, I feel like you'd get your value in like the connections you'd make. And then if you actually did go to the
Hmm.
presentations, then you basically double the value.
Yes.
And it's like one of
Yes.
the like like how making decisions around things like the decision fatigue of traveling and stuff can kind of be exhausting. This is the least
Hmm.
exhausting continuing education trip ever, and I like truly mean that because all you have to do, you get on the plane, you get to the venue, and then you don't have to think, and then you get to
Yeah.
the plane, and then you get home because the meals are all
Yeah.
organized, like the accommodations are organized, the socials are organized. There's basically zero need to Uber around or decide where you're gonna eat or like try to get a seat
Hmm.
somewhere. And then for
Yeah.
me, like my introverted nature, that was like an absolute game changer for me. But to get off of that sidebar and back into the conversation, it's like I did an ad for a ROM he owes me. Nonetheless, to get back into the
Sponsored but not
conversation.
sponsored.
Yeah, exactly. What I would say is we both have the common ground of jujitsu. And something
Yes.
that has been living in my head rent free is just how much of like a psychological like mishmash it is to train with a new promoted belt. Like I just got my blue belt. And as soon as I
Nice.
started
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. Like as soon as I started training with the blue belt, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am so bad at jujitsu." Like I was like, I thought I was bad at jujitsu, and now I really feel bad at jujitsu. And like the next day I trained, it was better, but it just really
Yep.
illuminates the areas to work on. And I know you got far more experience with jujitsu than I do, so I like to tap into your wisdom when it comes to the first like the growing pains of having just been promoted and kind of going through the rhythms of jujitsu and kind of overcoming any like self-doubt, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this kind of applies to almost any sport, any martial art that when you level up, there's that imposter syndrome that comes along with it where you're like, oh, I don't know if I actually deserve to be at this level. I don't really think I am at this level. And it is, I very much over the years have approached it and changed my mindset of like, you're just always learning. It doesn't matter how, there's that saying like you're forever a white belt. And it's very true. If you go into it with the mindset of you're going to always be learning, then it kind of makes the like, oh, I feel like I suck this week a little bit easier because you just kind of approach it with like, you know what, I'm still learning. Like there's growing pains with no matter what level you're at. And I think this applies to fitness. This applies to any sport that's out there, not just jujitsu. But if you approach it with that, I'm always just going to keep learning and keep growing mindset. It helps that imposter syndrome and that, having to kind of level up. um yeah, to me, once I finally learned that, and I think that also just came with getting older and getting more mature because when you're young, you feel like you know everything. And the older I get, I realize I don't know shit. That just applies to everything. So as I got older and I've just learned that there's always so much more to learn and there's always another person to learn it from. There's always going to be a bigger bear. There's always going to be somebody better than you. And if you can just focus on yourself and growing and learning and evolving, you'll never stop learning, but you'll always keep getting better too.
I like how you made that so simple and like tangible because I was really embracing the white belt for life mentality and I was like, yeah,
Right?
whatever. If I'm gonna be a white
Yeah.
belt, I'll be a white belt for as long as it takes. But I
Yeah.
also believe like in the beginner's mindset, which I think serves us both well within the fitness industry. One thing that
Mhm.
I did recently, and it's funny how I did all these things with such great timing, but it's merely a coincidence. I was going through and updating my Instagram memories or the Instagram highlights or whatever, and that led me to go back into like how I posted content when I was at my very first gym that I trained clients at, and then how I posted content when I
Mhm.
was at the second gym, and how I posted content when I moved into Evolve. And it was just like
Mhm.
I didn't realize how much of a contrast it was from then to now. Also in
Yeah.
a whole different like category, just like uh how I am older now. I was like, I look the same,
Yes.
same me. And I'm looking at the old stuff. I'm like, holy crap, I look like a child. Like,
Yeah,
uh,
baby Chris.
yeah, and I had no idea. And like I'm feeling like I'm aging at a great rate. Like I think I probably have pretty good genetics. My parents look kind of young. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's just humbling to just have it land how much changes in life and how we kind of evolve and like we barely recognize a previous version of ourselves. And
Mhm.
so like for me, I can pick out things that I've kind of changed on. One of them that stood out was my content, like my Instagram stories. I used to like be some like punk. I was just tossing out swears for no reason. And I just thought I was
Yeah.
badass. And I was just like almost overcompensating for how I showed up in real life. And then now on social
Mhm.
media, it's just like that's just me. I'm just being me. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
silly, sometimes I'm passionate, sometimes I'm reflective, sometimes I'm wordy. So if we
Yeah.
took the time machine back to, let's say, 2016, 2017, somewhere in that range for you, what is a way that you
Mhm.
used to show up in life that you can recognize now that you are different from today?
Whew. Back in 2016, 2017, that was in, I'm trying to remember where I was at that time. That was in my like hustle phase where I was working a full-time job as a vet tech, part-time as a personal trainer pretty much every single evening of the week. I was either doing personal training clients or I was teaching a jujitsu class or I was training a jujitsu class. Like that was hustle days for me. So it was like up at 4:30 in the morning, get to the gym, get to work, work all day, right after work. Like don't even go home, leave work, go straight to wherever I was training or coaching at, coach till 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then drive 40 minutes from Edmonton to Spruce Grove home and pretty much go to bed, do it all over again. So that was hustle days for me. It's very different now because
Yeah.
I like, there's no way that I could do that level of just being go, 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 go all the time with two kids and
Yeah.
living even farther out of the city now. Um, it was a great time in my life, though. I learned a lot and I learned a lot about my own work ethic when I'm really passionate about something, how hard I can actually work for something when I really want to. Um, yeah, it was a lot. It was definitely a very different phase of my life. I wouldn't change it, but it was a lot of not sleeping a lot, overtraining, not eating enough. And then also my anxiety was like fucking level 10 because
Hmm.
of all of these other things. So now things I still work hard, but I'm focused on one career now, not two, not two different careers. And yeah, so no, it's a very different time. And I was very much like go, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And now I've slowed that part down quite a bit just because I've had to, because my life in and of itself has changed. Yeah, that would, I think, be like the biggest difference between 2016, 2017 version of me and now. Yeah.
And that is awesome because like I definitely went through a very similar season during that time. And one of the things that I realized as I was doing my own reflections, because as I was watching like the posts that I was doing on the social media as I was going through the archives on Instagram, I was
Hmm.
like, I didn't even know that the career I have today existed. I didn't know it was possible. Like I kind of had it in my mind
Hmm.
that like at that period of time, I thought that what I'd have to do would be like train 40 sessions a week in person and like maybe grow a YouTube following and a podcast audience to the point where maybe I could like
Yeah.
have products that they could buy. And by products, I was thinking like
Hmm.
water bottles, t-shirts and stuff. I wasn't so much thinking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
like education and stuff like that. And I had no idea I'd be in the roles that I am in today.
Yeah.
And then I think about like the lifestyle that you've built for yourself. Did you have any idea that you'd be able to like make all of that happen? Like you did a lot of like major milestone moves over the last few years with like getting yourself into a more of like a calmer setting and really putting family first. Did that feel possible in 2016 to 17?
It was a dream. It is what it was. It was the goal that I wanted to work towards at that time. I just knew that I just had to hustle. And that was kind of where I was at. Like my biggest goal at that point was growing the personal training side enough financially so that I could quit being a vet tech and the bills would still get paid. So that was my sole focus at that time. Of course, like the having kids down the road, having a more balanced career. I knew that I could make that happen, but that wasn't the time for it. Um and yeah, so over the years definitely like that has been my goal, was to have a more balanced lifestyle and to pull back from in-person training so that I could be more at home with working from home, and then I could do other things on the side, like do my own podcast, do more content and things like that as well on the side. So yeah, it was always kind of like, okay, that's going to be my eventual goal, not even necessarily a 5-year plan or anything like that. It was just, this is where I want to be at one day and I'll get there eventually.
Hmm. So something that has got me thinking about, it's a two-part thing. I'm very rambly today, so if you notice, I'm
All
going
good.
from
I like
tangent
it.
to tangent. But I am curious if you have any kind of like a flow or structure or formula to setting up your goals for the future. Like, what does that look like for you? Do you have like a vision board? Do you write things out? Do you have a 5-year plan?
No, not at all. I am a I this might not be the best business advice in the world, but I am very much a build the plane as I'm about to jump out of it with my parachute type person. So I very much have an idea of a goal in my mind of where I want to go. I'm not necessarily the best at like, oh, let's sit down and plan out said goal. I'm better about shorter term goals now, about doing that kind of thing. But I am very much I'm going to build the plane as I'm flying it type of person. So yeah, for me, there's not necessarily a structure, but I feel like I have figured out enough shit over the years that I have that kind of self confidence in I'll figure it out as I go along. And I'll probably screw up along the way and I'll probably make some mistakes here and there, but it's all in the process of figuring it out as I go. So it's not the best business advice or life advice in general,
I
but it's
mean,
the honest to God truth.
I like your honesty more than anything. Like I know that when I'm talking to you, it's always going to be just like you're not going to blow smoke or try to like make things seem differently than what they are, which is probably why we've been connected and like-minded for
Very
such a
true.
long time.
Yeah.
So on the topic of like kind of setting goals and making things tangible and stuff, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you an exercise that I've recently adapted
I love it.
with ChatGPT. So I just have to find I use ChatGPT a lot and
I've
in
been using
ways,
it a lot lately too, especially for like responding to emails and stuff where I'm like, help
yeah.
me write this out in a way that is, this, and this. And surprisingly, it spits out some pretty good answers.
So, well, I'll give you one of the prompts that I did, and for full context and transparency, if anybody at home is going to try this out, I'm using the ChatGPT 40 model, so it's like the paid version.
Ooh.
So the prompt was, and it's funny because this is very unfiltered. I basically said I desperately need to use AI technology more in my day to gain back some of my time to get more revenue on a daily basis. I need you to use the info you have of me and ask me questions one at a time with executables after each question. The parameters
Oh,
of the executable is that it has to be a SMART goal, so that acronym, and then
yeah.
a goal that I can accomplish within the next 30 minutes with no additional costs. And then I
I
shared with
like
them
that.
all of the platforms that I use. So I use Optima Funnel for my website. So it's kind of like High Level and Kajabi and Calendly and ConvertKit all got together and had a baby. It is epic. And then I have a
That's
subscription
awesome.
for Script, Adobe Creative Suite, Microsoft 360. And then I also have educational material to help me refine my video content. So I'm giving them the full bird's eye view of what I'm working
Yeah.
with. And then I'm just because
Hmm.
ChatGPT is such like a low barrier to entry resource for us. And so
Hmm.
it's kind
It
of
really is.
like having like a pot of gold on a table and just ignoring it to not utilize it in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So its response was, let's start by identifying where you can streamline your current processes. And they were like, what is one task you find yourself spending too much time on daily that could benefit from automation or delegation?
Yeah.
And then they said, once you answer, I'll guide you toward a SMART goal to execute within 30 minutes. And then I kind of shared the bird's eye view of all the things that I'm working towards. And then I
Hmm.
shared with them that I'm looking to grow my audience on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so the SMART goal that they gave me was to select 3 to 5 clips that have strong engagement potential. And Descript will do that. So if you're not using Descript, you should.
Yeah.
But what I did was I got more intentional in my clip selection. Like sometimes I'll do
Hmm.
a task and I'll just be like, let's just bulk do this and just boom.
Like whatever. Yeah.
And what it did for me with specifying to choose 3 to 5 instead of like 20 to 25 was then I was very focused
Hmm.
on like what is the most engaging of these clips and how can I kind of align it with like my end goal of like either helping people or getting more people to view the long form version of the podcast itself. And because it was
Hmm.
just 5 things in 30 minutes and not like 200 things in 30 minutes, I was able to
Yeah.
get it done. I actually got it done in 10 minutes. And then I said, okay,
That's super
done.
cool.
And it was such a game changer for me. And I'm going to be leaning into that hard over the next like few weeks.
You should,
Um,
yeah, you should send me that initial prompt that you gave because that
I
is
will.
really cool and a good way to utilize. Everybody's worried about Chat GPT taking over our jobs when really we could be harnessing it to help our jobs.
It's the nerds using ChatGPT that are going to take the jobs.
Exactly.
Like, oh man, I'm gonna share something with you that I almost feel guilty for, but we're just being fully transparent on this podcast. So I've
Yeah.
recently taken on I really enjoy this routine of mine where every time I have to go get groceries, I'm making myself walk to the grocery store.
Hmm.
And the nearest grocery stores for me are, I think it's like 2 kilometers and 2.5 kilometers away or something like that. Like they're not like 500 meters away.
Yeah.
And it makes for like the perfect length of walk for like
Yeah.
trying to get activity to the level that it needs to be when you're doing a lot of Zoom calls.
Hmm.
And I've really like I just have really enjoyed the neighborhood settings that I've chosen on the road. Like I kind of choose the longer way to kind of get more residential than like the
Yeah.
industrial or like the sketchy areas.
Yeah.
And then when I get to the grocery store, um, there's a kind of like a divide in people when it comes to self-checkouts. Some people are like self-checkouts are stealing my friend's job, and some people are like self-checkouts are awesome. I don't have to talk to anybody.
That's
I'm the
me.
second. I love self-checkouts.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
I
so
do too.
I go through the self-checkout and I'm kind of observing sort of like the micro interactions of all the staff. Like and this
Hmm.
isn't to be critical because I've worked in grocery. It is very like monotonous, is very boring. Nobody wants to be
Hmm.
there. Well, some people want to be there forever, but not everybody wants to be there forever.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely empathize, but it was just to the point where like I finished bagging all my groceries. I was done with everything, and then I'm going to go through like the gate that they put there to make sure that you can't get out if you're not supposed to get
Yeah.
out. And like the guy that's observing all the grocery bagging and checking out is just kind of like standing there looking at his phone. So like I have
Hmm.
to get his attention to get him to move so I can go about
Yeah.
my way. And I even put the basket back for him. Like that's one of my favorite things to do is put the basket back.
Yeah.
And it just kind of got me thinking. I was like, people's attitudes in life are going to have such a big influence in their outcomes.
A
Like
100%.
the it doesn't matter what industry they're in, what they do for work, how old they are, how
Hmm.
much experience they have. It's like you on an everyday given basis, how you approach the situation. Like from my point of view, if this guy, and I'm like, I have no doubt he's probably a great worker, very reliable, all those things, but just like he's in the wrong spot. Like he's just
Hmm.
is not something that really utilizes his potential. But
Yeah.
there's probably somebody else who likes having conversations with people all day who would chat up everybody that's going through the self-checkout, and they'd be so
Yeah.
chatty they wouldn't be blocking anybody or anything like that. They'd be very
Yeah.
like present.
Yes.
They might be better suited for the role. And
Yes.
so it just got me really thinking about how much of a game changer it can be to kind of like look inward and fill your day with things that you really enjoy doing. And then
Hmm.
if you're finding that you're doing too much of one thing and it's taking up all your time, like the value of like, for some people, it's like, it takes too much time to write my own workouts for my stuff, or it takes too much time to figure out what I'm going to do for my workouts.
Yeah.
And so I see lots of colleagues like outsourcing their workouts to other people. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I do with jujitsu. I'm like, somebody else is going to
Yeah.
tell me how to be strong through the
Yeah.
jujitsu lens, and then I'm just going to show up and just like listen and do what they
Yeah.
say and then go home.
Yes.
Um, but
Completely agree.
I mean, with all of that said, what have been, I'm going to challenge you to come up with two different ways that you have either changed something about your daily routine to kind of make it more purposeful and more enriching, or things that you have maybe allowed somebody else to take over in your life
Mhm.
that have given you back more time while not taking away from your momentum.
Um, well, one thing that I have, I don't want to say outsourced, I'll say I expanded my village, is my girls go to daycare. And being a mom, especially a self-employed mom who works from home, it almost felt like a bad thing to do to send my kids to daycare. But the reason why I did it is because when I was at home with my girls, I, it's hard to do both. I can't be present as a mom and be a good mom if I'm trying to work. And I can't do my job and give my clients the attention that they deserve if I'm trying to deal with my kids. So I made the choice, as much as I didn't want to. I decided that if I really wanted to grow my business, which in turn was going to benefit my family, that my girls would actually benefit from going to daycare. So I did. I sent my girls go to daycare, and they love it and they thrive there. So for me, that was expanding my village. And I don't want to say outsourcing childcare, but I guess essentially that's what I was doing, was outsourcing childcare so that I could be at home and then I can concentrate 100% on my work during the day. And then I can still be mom and be 100% focused on them when I'm done work. For me, that was one of the biggest game changers so that I could actually focus on my business, because it was really difficult to do both and try to
Hmm.
do both and feeling like I was failing at both no matter what I was doing. So that was one. It might not be the answer that you were expecting, but in all honesty, like that was the biggest game changer over the past few years, was outsourcing childcare for my kids during the day, during the week. Other things that I have done is outsourced over this past year is outsourced help for my business. So I did have a business coach do a mentorship over the past year to help find holes in my business and things that I needed to do better on. And I took a lot of good things from that. There are certain things that just didn't, I felt like just didn't apply to my business, but it was good information to learn so that I could use it down the road if I wanted to, or just know for myself, okay, yeah, there is that option, but I don't feel like that's for me. It actually solidified in this is why I want to do things this way. But for me, it was also just great to have somebody else put eyes on my business and be like, here's some things that you could do better, and here's some ways that you could do it. And again, just in that always learning mentality. And I love being able to learn from different people, whether they're in our industry or in other industries, to just take what may be useful for me so that I can learn and improve at what I'm currently doing. So those would be
I
two of
like
the
that.
biggest things.
Well, I really like the childcare one because
Yeah.
that's like there's a lot of weight to that decision. And like obviously I'm
Hmm.
not a parent, but like I'm a very passionate uncle. So like my
Yeah.
uncle traits can kind of spill over and
Yeah.
make me someone who would make a good parent.
Yeah.
And so I like part of why I'm so driven is because I have an unshakable conviction that I'll have a family. I'll probably just have a family later on in life.
Hmm.
And because of that knowledge, it expedites like my sense of urgency in getting to
Hmm.
a point in my career where I can kind of like free up more time because I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
if I want to do the things the way I envision myself doing them, the amount of work that I'll do each week is going to shrink as I get older in
Hmm.
order to go into the next season of life where I can be present. And even if it was just being present for my parents or present for my siblings or present for a few close friends, um, that feels like more of enriching part of life than anything else. Like shout out to
Hmm.
Mike Dola because he's kind of like my North Star when it comes to that stuff, where he was able to
Yeah.
build his successful business in his 30s, become a
Yeah.
dad in his 40s, and be able to literally just be as present as humanly possible, like to the point where if he's not present, it's because he's
Yeah.
tired of being present. And then also playing
Yes.
Lego, like him playing
Yeah.
Lego stands out to me in a big way. But like for me, as I'm like reflecting on this and thinking about that big move that you made, but then understanding like how it makes such a big impact tangibly,
Hmm.
I'll share a time when I was actually given advice and I did the complete opposite.
Hmm.
So the advice was actually given to me on my podcast, and I think this was probably back in like between 2020 and 2021.
Hmm.
And it was with someone that both of us know, that doesn't live in Edmonton, but I'm going to keep it a mystery. And it
Fair.
was essentially, I told them that I was in like three different roles at the time. One of the roles was, I believe I was working with Lululemon at that point on a short
Oh,
contract,
okay.
but I was also doing like social media contracting, doing some online training, doing the in-person wherever applicable, whether it was in a park or whatever, if it was during gym closures and stuff.
Hmm.
And I asked this person for advice on what I should do. And they were
Yeah.
like, just stop doing all the stuff and just like focus on your stuff. And it's
Yeah.
not wrong advice, but I'm going to present kind of like a case study for why I went in the opposite direction.
Hmm.
Because we kind of talked about that white belt mentality and
Hmm.
just like always kind of like learning and stuff. And like for me, being the part of like presently part of three businesses and then working alongside with additional businesses for like contractor work, helping people with their podcast, their website, their
Hmm.
marketing, etc., has given me such great exposure to learning. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I have like undoubtedly gotten more like smart and
Hmm.
experienced in a faster rate because
Hmm.
of my willingness to live in multiple worlds at once.
Hmm.
Um, and I can feel it refining and whatnot. So I guess the point of that little tangent was to share with anybody who might be in a similar position to me, where maybe they haven't gotten things diluted to just one track that they need to focus on, and maybe they're finding themselves in a lot of different worlds. It's
Hmm.
not a bad path. Both
No.
paths work. And like I also can say confidently that if I had chosen to just focus on only my own stuff,
Yeah.
I would have no regrets. There would be no drawbacks to the process.
Mhm.
But at the same time, taking the path less traveled, um, I've seen benefits from it, and I can make a case for it. I can be like, but this way works too.
Yeah.
So, with that said, have you ever encountered a time when somebody really highly qualified, really experienced, very wise, gave you advice that was still good advice, and you went in the opposite direction and you weren't wrong?
Yeah. So, um, definitely a few times. One that stands out of most recent was when I did my business coaching through this mentorship. They very much talked about doing like a one to many approach, and their thing, a lot of their people that they work with really have like a one to many coaching approach, like not quite a true group style, but more so one to many, and also focused a lot on like hiring a team of either other coaches, virtual assistants, those kinds of things. Going through that really solidified in me that I have zero fucking interest whatsoever in hiring a team. Like zero.
Yeah.
So because for me, I like being a one woman show. That being said, I understand that there are limitations to that. I can only spread myself so thin and I can only do so many things. And granted, there are things that eventually I may have to outsource financially by hiring later down the road. But it just solidified to me that I have no desire to hire a team. I would rather answer my own emails. I would rather do my own thing. And then I have full control of where I'm going and I can just be accountable to my clients. The other thing I learned from that is I don't really, in terms of my coaching, I am very much a one to one type of person.
Hmm.
So I don't, the one to many approach can work really well for certain people and that, but for me and the people, the women that I work with, very much a one on one approach.
Hmm.
And I really, for me, I like that. Now, granted, again, there's limitations to that because then that means I can only really truly take on so many clients and give them a great experience. And so for me, it just really solidified that I would much rather have fewer clients, but give them a legitimately awesome experience and a true one on one approach versus a one to many. And like I said, that works for other people. It's shown to be successful for both the client and the coach. It's great. It's just not for me.
Yeah. I mean, that is an awesome example. Because there are so many different ways to do the thing.
Yeah.
Like, even when it comes to exercise selection, like some people get
Mhm.
stuck on like, oh, you have to use like prime equipment, or you have to use this squat rack, or
Yeah.
you can't use dumbbells, or you should use
Yeah.
dumbbells, because so
Yeah.
many just like tribal mentalities.
Hmm.
When in reality, like there's no reason why a farmer couldn't wake up in the morning and push around bale and get some physical benefit from that.
Right.
That is like, it could be a press, it could be
Yeah.
a sort of a squat motion, kind of depending on the mechanics of how they're doing it. But it's like exercise can seem complicated, but we can
But
also make it very, very simple.
it is.
And
Yeah.
business can seem complicated, but we can also make that very, very simple. And like
Yeah.
I've had the privilege to see a lot of people and how they build their business, and that gives me a lot of like substance to say like, look, like there's like 56 different ways that you can do this where you
Yep.
can live a life that you're extremely proud of.
Hmm.
So I'm glad that you kind of took that path, because like there's
Yeah.
lots of coaches who have been able to make that they've made it work really, really well. Not
Yeah.
just good enough, but to the extent that they're able to carry out everything that they'd want with their life. Like obviously they're not like they don't have 8 Lamborghinis, but anybody that I know who has one Lamborghini, the Lamborghini isn't it. That's not the show.
Yeah. No, not
Um,
at all.
like they're reflecting on their connections with people. The
Yeah.
wealthiest people that I know are reflecting on their connections with people.
Hmm.
And so like it's not the material goods, it's not like a pissing contest as to who has more of what, etc. It is kind of like your sense of purpose. Um being able to cover the bases of like roof over your head, being able to have your kids getting the life that they deserve, and being in the environment that you want to be in.
Hmm.
So, with that said, you have mentioned about getting back with your horseback riding and stuff. And forgive me if
Yay.
my terms are off, but like, tell me more about that. How has that made you feel? What kind of sparked the desire to kind of get more immersed into that, etc.?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, you and I both share the common ground that we both grew up on a farm. So I grew up on a farm it was a beef and dairy farm, and we also had horses growing up. And I was very much a crazy horse girl. I think I was born that way. So yeah, as a kid, I rode horses for many years. I did many years of 4-H. I think you did 4-H as well too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I
Yeah,
did.
okay. You did beef and I did, was it beef? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You did beef, I did horse 4-H. But you kind of know the background of the dedication that that takes being in 4-H and all that. And so I did many years of that. And then when I went to school, when I went to NATE to be a vet tech, I knew that after I graduated, I wasn't moving home after I was, an adult and going to go do my own thing and have my career. So I sold my horse when I was in school to actually a girl that was in my class. That was a hard decision because it was like I could feel that that chapter at that time in my life was closing. And so I knew, so there was probably a good 10 or so, over 10-year gap where I didn't have a horse. I didn't really ride. I would occasionally like go out to the farm and I'd ride like my grandpa's horse and stuff like that just to kind of do something fun. And then I always knew because we lived in the city. That was the other thing is we lived in the city, and I always knew that eventually down the road I would move out of town and I could have horses again. So that's what we did in 2021. We finally moved out of the city. We should have moved years sooner, but just life and circumstances happened and we never did. So we finally moved out of the city in 2021 onto an acreage. And then, yeah, that was just my ultimate goal was I want to start riding again because it was such a big part of my life that I missed. So yeah, last year I finally got a horse again and started riding. And I have neighbors that I ride with all the time that are great friends and so much fun. And honestly, it's just been the best. It's been like that, just reviving a piece of myself that I had completely shut down at one point and forgotten about. And then kind of just reviving it again has been the best.
That's gotta feel awesome. And like you said
It does.
something that really stood out to me where you said we should have moved sooner.
Yep.
So I'm curious as to like what makes you say that because I just kind of came to the screen and was oof, maybe I
Yeah.
should have done some things sooner, but what kind of stood out for you that made you come to that conclusion?
We just always had it in our mind, both my husband and I, we had it in our mind for some odd reason that we had to live in the city first before we could move out of town. And looking back, that logic didn't make any fucking sense. It
Yeah.
just didn't make any sense. Like, really, we could have lived exactly where we are now and still had the careers and everything that we had, but just lived on an acreage. So that's what I mean by like we could have moved sooner. We just got kind of complacent for quite a few years living in the city. And yeah, so then it was finally like, okay, we need to either move now or we're not going to ever move. So we finally did. And yeah, it was the best decision ever. And that's why looking back, I was like, we should have done it so many years sooner because really, we didn't have to live in the city at all if we didn't
Yeah.
want to.
Well, I mean, in that decision making process, it's kind of like similar to like, let's say you're gonna buy something that was $20,000, like a new car or something, and it's like, should we do it? Should we not? Oh, we could use
Mm,
this money for something else. Oh, it's not good timing. Like when
yes.
you're kind of having that decision process with your move, what
Hmm.
were the things that helped you overcome that kind of resistance to finally take the leap?
Well, for us, it was circumstantial where um, I'm trying to think. Like it was circumstantial in that it was just a good time in the market to be able
Hmm.
to move and to sell our house. That was kind of the biggest things we were worried about, like, selling our old house and all that kind of stuff. But it was kind of during a really busy, quick time. And we didn't really we just wanted to kind of like sell our house, and then our plan was to rent, but then we just happened to find this place kind of just out of nowhere. And then we realized we didn't really want to fucking rent. We wanted to
Yeah.
like buy a place and move now. So we did. And then, yeah, so it was really like circumstantial, but I like you bring up a really good point, because how many times have we heard this from a client where they tell us that they wish that they would have started years sooner or a month sooner, but they never did because it wasn't the right time. There was this going on, there was that going on. When sometimes you just need to do the thing that you've been thinking about, whether or not it's the perfect time.
I mean, that it's crystal clear to me, and it's something that I try to remind myself of.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of my fitness conference trips, it hasn't felt like it was like perfect timing for budget or perfect timing for schedule, but I was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I need to do this.
Yeah.
And I've never really had any regrets. Like the times when I haven't gone to conferences in the most recent times were usually because I made like an equivalent forward leap with one of the other categories of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
for myself, the last competition I did for jiu-jitsu, I traveled to Saskatoon.
Yeah.
And so that takes up a lot of time and it takes up a lot of money. I think the whole weekend probably cost me like at least $600.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Um, yeah, it was just like you can only do so many things, but the fact that I took a leap outside of my comfort zone to compete for the fourth time
That's
um
awesome.
was important for me because it just gets me that much more experience in like a high tension, high stakes environment where it's like
Mm-hmm.
your adrenaline is just you can either let your adrenaline cause you to freeze, cause you to
Mm-hmm.
spaz, or
Yep.
cause you to like lean into like what you've been working on over the many
Yeah.
years. And sometimes
Yep.
working on things can be mindset specific, maybe not so much technique, but like, okay, what do I have control of in this situation? Like, where am I on this person's gi? Am I keeping my frames? Am I
Yeah.
thinking about points? Are they getting points on me? Are they
Yeah.
not? And like full transparency, it was a best of three with one dude, and he beat me two out of three times. So meaning we only had to do two matches,
Yeah.
but I learned a ton. And
Yeah.
that's
You do.
like I learned more than everybody who didn't go to that competition to
Yeah.
compete.
Yeah. And
And
you find things that you need to work on in that case.
absolutely.
And you're like, oh, I got caught with this. I got caught with that. Oh, like obviously I got beat on points. I need to work on, like, it gives you a laundry list of things that you can work on and then come back to the next competition and just do better.
Is kind of similar to that ChatGPT exercise that I had
Yeah.
shared with you earlier.
Yeah.
Um, but with all of that said, we're going to bring the episode to a close. After we sign off, I'll keep you on the call so we can banter for a couple minutes. But before we sign off to our audience, I am curious as to if you had one piece of advice to give the audience, it can be very general advice with regards to fitness, nutrition, or life in general. What would that piece of advice be?
Um, this will apply to any goal, no matter what it is, but consistency and showing up is the most important thing. And it's not showing up perfectly. It's not showing up in 100% at all times. It's just consistently showing up day over day, week over week, and doing something every day just to try to improve just a tiny bit.
I like that. It's like it's simple, but it can make a huge difference if somebody actually takes that advice literally and applies it immediately.
Yeah.
But with that said, I'm so glad that we made this episode happen. I
Me
feel
too.
like it's long overdue. So
Yeah.
thank you for joining me today, Jackie.
Thanks for having me on, Chris.